Well, whenever I talk to people who are new to backpacking and I say that I camp out in the woods overnight, they want to know, first and foremost, what do I use for shelter? Well, out on the trail, of course, you can use the shelters that are often out there, or you can bring your own, which means either bringing a tent or bringing a hammock, or there's a few other options that I'll get into. So stay tuned. So before we get started with the topic at hand, let's get through some definitions. First of all, what is backpacking? Well, when I'm talking about backpacking, I'm talking about going on an extended hike and staying out in the woods overnight. Now, it might be 3 days, it might be 3 weeks, it might be 30 weeks, but the idea is the same. So how does this differ from other forms of camping and hiking? Well, there's a few other options you could use. You could go what I call base camping, where you go to maybe a commercial campground or something. You set up a camp there, either an RV or a tent that you set up, and you take day trips from there, climbing mountains, climbing 4,000 footers. That's a common one. Car camping, pretty much the same thing, except maybe you sleep in the car or something like that, or you keep all your equipment in the car. You don't have to worry about weight or anything like that. And then finally, it's just plain old day hiking, which is just going out. You're not going to stay overnight. You're just going to go out for a hike in the woods. And these are all great options, and people should enjoy them all. So here, I'm just going to tell you what I use. This is not a product recommendation specifically. Whatever you decide to use, whatever's best for you. I'm just giving you an example because a lot of people ask me, well, what do you use for this kind of shelter? So here's my example. I use a Z-Packs duplex tent. And the duplex motto means it's a 2-person tent. One thing to be aware of when you're considering tent size, equipment counts as a person. So if you've got 2 people going, you probably need a 3-person tent. If you're going alone, well, a 2-person tent, if you're going to keep your equipment inside with you, works best. Now this tent is advertised as a 19-ounce tent. That's the tent and the sack. That's super light. Mine actually weighs 31 ounces with everything. And you say, well, that's actually a substantial discrepancy. One of the problems, this tent is sold without stakes, but you can't use it without stakes. So to me, that's a little unfair to advertise its weight as 19 ounces. Stakes are about another 1/4 pound, in my case, another 3.5 ounces, and they're not included. I happen to choose to get the heavier camouflage material. That's no longer sold, but it is an extra 4 ounces because it's a thicker material. And I've had people actually offer to buy my tent from me out on the trail, but of course I wasn't going to sell it. I use a different stuff sack than comes with it, and it's a little bit heavier. It's just a Walmart special, but it's shaped in such a way that it allows me to carry my tent on the outside of my pack. I also did some modifications that I actually found on YouTube, and I will leave a link to a nice video on how this particular tent can be modified just to make it a little more waterproof or make the floor pitch a little better, and that added another 3 ounces. So you add all that up and I end up with a 31-ounce tent, which is still less than 2 pounds. So that's what I've got. So it pitches at about 4 feet high. It's 45 inches wide and it's 89 inches long. So it's longer than an average person. I'm like 6 feet tall, so I've got an extra 1.5 feet on the end. It has what's called a bathtub floor of heavier material. And some people will use Tyvek ground cloth with it, but to me, if you're selling me a lightweight tent, but then you tell me, yeah, but you have to add all this other stuff to it, well, it's no longer a lightweight tent. Yeah, you just separated out the tent from all the rest. The Z-Packs company says that you don't need a ground cloth. I don't bother with one. A lot of people do use them. They want the extra security from that. There are some interior mesh pockets that just kind of make it easier to keep track of your small items. It is very expensive. I bought it for about $600. Now, this same tent retails between $700 and $750 depending on the color. Now, that you'd say that's kind of unusual. Why would the color make a difference? Well, the different colors are actually different weight material, and it's the material weight that changes the price of the tent. Other characteristics, it is a trekking pole tent, and that's kind of a limiting factor. That means that your trekking poles have to be used to set up the tent. So if you're going to use this as sort of a base camp tent, you're going to have to find something. I say it's trekking poles, but you would have to maybe fashion some other kind of poles so that you could use your trekking poles for what they're meant for, and that is to go hiking with them. It has two screen doors, these rainbow doors on either side, so if you are using it for two people, each have your side of the tent that you can get out. It has two vestibules with 4 tent flaps, and the nice thing about the vestibules is it just gives you, and I'll show you that, it just gives you extra area. It's made out of what's called a Dyneema composite fiber. It used to be called Cuban fiber. They changed the name for marketing reasons. I give that a WTF because Dyneema doesn't convey anything more to me than Cuban fiber did, but that's what they claim. Most of these tents, the material was kind of see-through. My camouflage one is actually better than most. If you get the heavier material on the newer tents, the darker colors, they're a little less see-through, but the gray, the lightest versions of this, you can actually, if somebody were in it moving around, somebody outside would see that they were there. It is not freestanding. That's another limiting factor. There are options available to make it freestanding, but once again, once you avail yourself of those options, you're adding more weight. In other words, they're giving you some external poles that will hold the thing in place. Another reason it's a limiting factor is until you learn how to set it up, say, on a tent platform, it might be very difficult to do that. I'm actually prefer tent platforms, and I'm actually getting pretty good at setting it up on a tent platform. But if you're at a place where the ground is very hard, like say in the Grand Canyon, a non-freestanding tent might actually not be best suited for that environment. So here's how it works for me. You have to pitch it properly. It has held up in heavy rain. It can be pitched on a platform, like I mentioned, with a bit of ingenuity. It's easy to carry outside of my pack because of the way I roll it up. It's excellent for solo camping, and I have managed to use it with two people. In other words, Stumbledore and I have shared this tent. Some of our equipment has to go outside a little, but given that it is 7.5 feet long and we're only 6 feet or less, we do have that extra space at the end of the tent. Now, it does slope in such a way that it comes very close to your head. There are some doodads on the outside where you can stretch it up a little bit to get that out of your face, so if you're claustrophobic, you can at least get it away from you. Hammocking is another option that many hikers love. And here's what I see as the advantages and disadvantages compared to using a tent. First of all, I found it to be more comfortable actually. I slept much better in the hammock than I did in a tent, at least my first few days out on the trail. You may use a smaller insulating pad, so that will actually offset the fact that usually the hammock is a little bit heavier than some of the lightest weight tents. You don't need to worry about flat ground. I mean, it's suspended. It's like a tent suspended in the air, so the ground really isn't as much a concern for you. It is comparable in weight to the tent when you consider all the pluses and minuses for what you have to carry and what you don't have to carry. Some of the minuses, suitable trees are often hard to find. Equipment space within the hammock itself is very limited. You have a few mesh pockets. I used to hang my hat up in there, by the drawstring and put a few things in there, but your main equipment is actually going to be outside your hammock, and that can be a problem from time to time. You're usually not able to use a shelter if you have a hammock with you because typically shelters, they're wooden floors, and you don't have typically the equipment with you to say, oh, I'm not going to set up my hammock tonight, I'm going to sleep in the shelter. I mean, basically you are committed to using the hammock every night. And it's not easy to get out of at night. And I've laid there in the hammock at times and said, oh, I really need to get up. And you know why I might need to get up in the middle of the night. And to get motivated to do it, it's kind of hard because you've got to get out of your sleeping bag inside the hammock or crawl out of the hammock with your sleeping bag around you, which is going to get your sleeping bag dirty as soon as it hits the ground. So there's just all sorts of logistical problems in getting out of the thing, especially in the dark when you need to get out. So, like I said, it's like a tent suspended in air. It's akin to a two-wall tent. Now, I didn't talk about two-wall versus one-wall tents. My Z-Pax duplex is a one-wall tent. That means it's one structure. A two-wall tent is one that has a mesh, and then it's got to fly over it. And this particular hammock that I have is like that. It's got a, it's open to the air, but then you put a fly over it, and that keeps the water off you if it rains. It has mosquito netting to keep the bugs out, so this is not like you're sleeping in the open. You can exit this particular one by way of a self-closing center exit. Not all hammocks are like that, but mine is. It's got that large overhead fly to protect you from the weather. And the thin fabric underneath you is not insulated. And if it's a cold, windy day and you're lying in this thing, you may very well freeze your butt off even inside a sleeping bag. So that's why I recommend that you bring an insulated pad with you. So I have this Hennessy Ultralight Explorer ASIM motto. It's called, ASIM stands for asymmetrical. A couple key points. A backpacking hammock, it's not a recreational backyard device that you might see in somebody's backyard over near a fire pit, or the kids play on it and swing back and forth. This is actually a serious piece of hiking equipment. Mine weighs 2.5 pounds. That's 40 ounces, but the weight is offset by replacing the sleeping pad and a pillow, which you don't need, with just that small insulating pad. And I calculated that it's actually a net 2 ounces lighter, even though it is 9 ounces heavier than the tent, because of the gains that you get, or the less weight you have to carry with your sleeping equipment. It actually turns out to be 2 ounces lighter. There is extra consideration needed for overnight equipment storage, and if you do what some people do, they set up all these fancy, kind of like a mini hammock for their equipment, that just adds some of the weight back. Other options, well, you could get a tarp. It's the lightest weight option that I found out there. Z-Packs sells tarps, very expensive ones, given that it's just a big rectangular piece of material. They weigh between 5 and 7 ounces, depending on whether you get the 7x9 or the 8.5 by 10 foot option. There is no mosquito netting. There is no floor. It takes a lot of experience and practice to use it effectively. And I would say that a tarp is really for the real hardcore experienced hikers. Another choice is what's called a bivy sack, which is a little bit different than the bivy shelter. Bivy is short for bivouac. I looked online. I don't know a lot about them, but they're really basically a tent for your sleeping bag. It's a very confined, very small space. The one I found was 20 ounces. Well, that's great. That's, 9 ounces, 9 or 11 ounces less, whatever. I think 11 ounces less than my tent. But when I saw somebody demonstrating its use, they set it up under a tarp. Well, okay, so now you're just going to add that 7 ounces approximately back. So now you've got a 27 ounce setup instead of the couple more ounces. You get a full tent. So that's why I would discourage people from, if you're new, from using a bivy shelter. So that's the brief review of what your types of options are for shelters. So thanks for listening, and as usual, please like, comment, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know when I posted something new. And I recommend that you take a look at this one next. Thanks.